This is my standard. We are recording this for posterity. Everybody's been aware, so don't say anything super silly, or if you do, we're going to really enjoy it later. So, to start off before we get going, we have two new faces as of today. This is your job.
I know, I do it. Okay.
Start as we mean to go on.
We have two new contractors joining us. We have John Flater.
Hi.
We have Lauren Callender. Hi. We haven't met face to face yet. So they're joining us there's going to be one change coming up. I think Spencer's going to come talk about it. So we're going to have that opportunity again of putting the open buildings out there, and then a chance for people to express interest, and then we'll kind of figure out how we'll shuffle that out. So their assignments are mostly finalized, and in fact, Karen's is. So you want to tell us where you're going to be?
John Muir and
John Stanford International School. Yeah. So so it's nice for our compliance psychs who are currently covering those buildings. They're going to be freed up, which means we can load them with a bunch of other stuff now. And John's kind of all over the place, but we're going to get right now he's focused on Loyal Heights. We're going to have him on the preschool assessment team as a point 2, and then we'll kind of shake out where he is after that. Yeah. So welcome. Thanks for joining us, and it's so great to have you.
So, many of us remember during our last training, wasn't an early release training, I remember. It was our October 13th Our October 13th training, we gave you homework, because that's just how I roll. So who can remind me of what your homework was? Miss Johnson from the back.
to make a statement or share gratitude with someone, and then convey that gratitude, and then fill out the list of what you did and what the response was.
There you go. So you had to tell us who you delivered it to, what type of message you delivered, and what was their response. Luckily, not everybody said their response was via email. Some people told me more than that. So I got a little bit more information, Dr. Wood. So just to give you the little, why does this matter? What is the importance of gratitude? Again, we were really kind of rushed towards the end of that presentation. So just to hit on that again, look at the PowerPoint, Dr. Wood. You guys can read. You're graduate level educated. You don't want me to read it to you, do you? So obviously, as we are all aware, there are biological, physiological, as well as psychological benefits to demonstrating gratitude to others. So I was inspired by Dr. Sue's playing around with word cloud, so I had to figure out how to do that myself because, realized I didn't know how to do something, so I had to figure out how to do it so I could brag to my 10-year-old that I knew how to do it, and he didn't. So you can see that by and large, the majority, which I had 24 people, I believe, who filled out that link, so thank you to those who did that. By and large, you chose to deliver that message to a colleague, whether that was a special ed teacher or another psych. One person delivered it to their gardener, which I was like, okay, that's kind of, that's kind of where I went with that too. I was like, you have a gardener? No, wait, this is positive. Don't lament the fact that I don't have a gardener. The majority of you, again, use email as your delivery system. There's a lot of benefits to that. Some of us, like Mr. Amare, decided to use a chant, which was inspiring for me, and I have to figure out a way to work that into my world now. Look for that happy opportunity. And again, looking at that action word of how did they feel? And I was able to, not even knowing that this is what I was going for, by your stories, I was able, for most of you, to determine what that response was, whether it was they felt appreciated, they felt understood. One of them, Sarah here, I don't think so. Sarah delivered one to her sister, and her sister, she sent a text to her sister, and her sister immediately called her and said, "What's wrong?" Which again, you know why she picked her sister, because she's concerned, she's checked in, they are close, So that in and of itself shows us why some people deserve gratitude, and we want to give it to them, right? So just to kind of give you a couple of fun little. So I had students give me gratitude letters for teaching them about gratitude. And if you leave me a sticky note in my cube, you will notice that that lives on the wall of my cube for eternity. And it's the same thing at my school. If I get a note from somebody, it's up on, because again, that's just positive reinforcement that is automatically in my environment that reminds me why I do this every single day. So, I mean, I certainly didn't tell her to draw a tree and tell me that I helped her grow. So this is just, and for those of us that are, in schools that are really talking about approaching standard and meeting, so this would be exceeding standard for a thank you note for a sixth grader. Like, talk about like, you can tell that I taught them about the 5-point scale and Maslow, and like, I was like, man, yeah, right? And then this one, thank you. I love the lesson about the brain, however weird that may sound. These are my kids. These are the kids I like to hang out with. So that shows you, again, what it's like to be the recipient, right? How empowering that is for us to receive it. But then Michelle, So Michelle really took it to heart and went that night, I believe, that when we had the training, and wrote a comment on a blogger's website indicating how much she appreciated what they did and how much it's benefited. And this is what their response was. It's like the circle of gratitude. Just keeps giving. Can you read it? Do you need me to read it to you? Okay. It's quite a feat to be able to genuinely acknowledge a stranger over the internet and to make them feel deeply seen and understood. That you have managed to do so in one comment says so much more about you than it does about me. It tells me that you have an incredible capacity for those very things you thanked me for spreading: optimism, kindness, and joy. Plus, you're beautifully articulate to boot. Thank you, Michelle, for this gem of a comment and for reading. It's going in my don't quit blogging file without question. XOO. She's got an interesting, there's no A-B pattern here. I don't get it. I always thought it was supposed to be like one hug, one kiss with that. But yeah. So just to show you kind of the two different sides of the coin here. How much benefit, again, we both get, right? Whether you're the giver or the receiver of gratitude. Any questions or comments or anything? I'm just trying to go with alliteration, but I can.
It's called Live Simply by, I mean, you guys are going to laugh because it's like such a thing. Live Simply by Annie, and it's an organization. It's about, okay, well, I read, now you're going to get me on a little rant here.
I am loving this. Rant away.
I forget what, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up by Kari.
Yeah.
So that book kind of changed my life. I simplified everything. But then I found this blog, and I really like the way this girl writes. She has a really witty sense of humor, and she's kind of hard on you as the audience, and then she does these Monday meditations. The one that I commented on was called Returning to Light, and it's about how even with all of this horrible stuff going on in politics and in the environment, about protecting ourselves, and like that it's okay to be thankful for the great things in our lives, and it's okay to, like, we can't spread joy if we're not feeling our joy. Mm-hmm. So delight in your life, in the positives that you do have, and try to spread that. Anyway, yeah, you can look her up. Live Simply by Annie. The end.
The end. That's not ranting. She doesn't know ranting, does she? Yeah. We could show her ranting, couldn't we, Judy? Okay, so. Where's Tanya and Justin? Are you both doing it, or is she doing it? Just Justin. That sounds like a blog. Just Justin. That also sounds like an ABC movie, maybe.
So, as everyone knows, it's School Psychologist Awareness Week, which I don't think we've had a monthly staff meeting like during School Psychologist Awareness Week. That's what Ashley was saying.
That's my recollection. It's never.
I don't know about it until it's passed.
Okay.
That's not what I want to hear.
Yeah. And we're also doing, as Sunshine Committee, we're also doing a Sharpen the Saw activity. So Sharpen the Saw comes from a story about a lumberjack who is trying to cut down a tree, and he's using a saw, and someone comes up to him and says, what are you doing? He says, I'm trying to cut down this tree, but it's taking too long. And the guy says, well, why don't you sharpen your saw? And he says, I don't have time to sharpen my saw. And he keeps sawing at it, and he's not able to cut down the tree. So it's just a metaphor for how we need to take time to rejuvenate and do things that help us be more efficient and more effective in the future. And we also have NAS, their theme for this year is Light Up, Be a Positive Charge, which is kind of phoning it in.
It's not that different than
opinion,
last year's, but yeah.
So it's just the idea of how you can do small things and be a positive charge for other people, for students, for your coworkers, and things like that. And positive words can be things like create, inspire, help, contribute, things like that. So we got this from the NAS page, and it's just a light bulb about how to be a positive charge. And everyone has coloring pencils, markers, thank you, Ashley, and things to color. So just to maybe put down words that you think are inspiring or your favorite part of your job, and then just maybe coloring in. And we'll just take like 5 or so minutes to do that. And I have an example. I don't know if people can see that. Oh, it's over there. For some reason I was thinking it was this computer. So I put professional development because that's like one of my favorite aspects of this job, and it helps me help other people. And yeah, and I just colored it. So we're going to take 5 minutes to do that, and then afterwards we'll just talk about some of the aspects of the job that we like.
We've got colored pencils, we've got markers, I've got glitter glue if you promise not to make a mess. I don't really trust a lot of people with that.
Glitter glue?
I know, that's kind of...
Ashley, you should be in charge of announcements in the future. Because you are more like, what's the word?
Animated.
Animated, yes.
Manic, depending on
Manic, animated.
how nice you feel. Do you want a black pencil? I have many. I have gray, dark and green. All right. We have a bunch of these. If you need another one. I'm just trying to figure out what mine is. If you feel a little more, I don't want to say juvenile, but if you are a crayon kind of person, I got like you want a crayon? Oh, yeah, I started thinking your mind. Well, no, that's why I have two. Like, I have, Jennifer, if you're like, I'm just feeling one-wordish today, you can go this route. But if you're like, I don't know, once I made one, I was like, and I'm just I'm not even going to here. I think there's
You have to open up. You get two from the song.
You know what I mean? Some kind of change.
I try to go like,
You did it. You participated. Okay.
I figured it out. Now I have to write about it.
You know why?
Then when you kind of go, oh yeah, this is where.
Rescheduled my meeting for 8:40.
Oh, that's awesome.
I did think about, well, no, I just said
I'm here.
I'm here, but I told him yesterday that I was leaving for, all this stuff. So. I thought about it this weekend.
My own personal set.
Okay. Did we hear anything? Did you catch one of them?
No. I mean, I saw Trish, but I haven't heard back from like the other.
Okay.
Do you want to go there?
I will go catch Trish.
Okay.
Sorry.
No.
And then,
I have a pencil Michelle, do we know what those
So they're wondering if the Skype screen shows what's when it
because she's presenting her screen, I can't consider they're making requests. No, they want to adjust what it looks like, but when Michelle, when we're presenting the desktop, we don't have.
So I think the one online here is.
Well, I want to.
Yeah, for sure, this is not what you're presenting.
Conferences. Just the general stuff.
But usually like you're presenting and then you have like
yeah.
But I went to the bigger conference with
Is that better, Michelle?
Well, no, it's not.
Because there's nothing to present.
Oh, okay.
So it's speaker view.
It's nice of them, but I would.
I know, Liz, we haven't muted it. It's okay that you can hear us, not you, the other Liz, sorry. I'm getting really comfortable with this whole them typing and me talking back, but it is weird. Stop. Okay, so.
I forgot to tell them that it's
So, we want to honor our time. You can wait, guys, just a second. So, you can continue working on this throughout today. Because if you're into it, we definitely want you to feel like you're happy with what you come up with. And then we're going to take all of them and make a collage up in the department to present to the world. So feel free to keep the colors and, keep working as we continue on with the staff meeting. Okay? Okie dokie.
Is it me?
There's no like alternate option. Confirm receipt of message.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Justin. So now let's move on to the practice items.
Yeah. So this is a simple one. It was in our it was in our Psych Weekly report, but I just want to remind you again because it's counterintuitive, though very small, nitpicky, and simple. When you get a referral and you hold your decision to assess meeting and you make that decision and then you go to document it in IEP Online, you're only choosing two choices. Proceed with refer to evaluation group if you decided yes, you're going to proceed with the evaluation, or no further action needed if the answer is no or anything else. So even though it says refer to 504, if your plan is to set up a 504 plan, that's totally fine. That's totally reasonable outcome. Don't select refer to 504. I know it seems counterintuitive. We were told this by Michelle Landwehr in compliance because it creates a reporting issue in IEP Online because then IEP Online is going to be looking for that 504 plan and there's nothing there. So it creates this compliance issue. Same with, don't select refer to sit. If you're gonna schedule a follow-up sit meeting, totally fine. Still select no further action needed. In the prior notice narrative, that's where you can explain whatever the outcome of the meeting is. But basically, when you're documenting a referral decision, you're just selecting one of two choices: no further action needed or refer to evaluation group. Everybody understand? Yes, Vaughn, question.
The only addition that I would say is that, and this is because I use this continually, under demographics, there is a section called notes. And I just find it's a great way to be able to communicate things that I might not necessarily want in a formal document as part of a referral packet, but it's something that I can pull forward and say, here are 65 emails about this student describing the behavioral concerns, and the family chose that they didn't see any behavioral difficulties. It just becomes another resource that isn't just locked away on my individual email account of these 65 events that have everybody in my school worried about this student. So it just becomes another resource that future teams can lean into.
Okay. Any questions or confusion about that? That's it. Easy peasy.
Great, thank you. Committee announcements, we have 6 minutes to do that, so let's start with the career letters. Do you have any announcements you want to talk about what you're doing right now?
I thought we
Have any plan?
we had a training session for Q Interactive, and there's a second one scheduled for, do you remember when it is?
I think it's December
6th, I think, yeah. So if you want to come to that, that would be awesome. Make sure that you have your iPads logged in, set up. You can get into your Interactive account. They're synced together, and you have fiddled with at least one practice assessment. So if you need help with any of those steps, contact one of the career letters.
Can I make a comment? Yeah. So I went to this, and then afterwards I was playing around with the practice assessments, and I forgot that at our training they had told us there's these videos and there's these documents that are really helpful within the system. So if you go in, they will explain a lot of things, which will keep me from bugging other people.
It's like Vaughn and I both live on that section of the website.
It's really helpful.
There's YouTube videos and screenshot step-by-step instructions.
Thank you. PLC?
Your PLT met this morning. Many of you, if you looked at your email boxes, should have received two documents, one called bylaws and one called decision-making matrix. The reason that we were sending them to you is that essentially one of the things that we need to do today is to get an affirmative on accepting the bylaws and accepting the decision-making matrix. The only adjustment that was made to the bylaw, I believe it was the bylaw, is about the word grant. It isn't about someone granting you permission or granting something. It's about a financial grant, and the intent was to have that as part of our documentation, so that in the event that, so for example, if a PLC were to become really excited about the work that they're doing, and they find that there are grants available on a national or state level, that the PLT could be in support of the pursuit of that, or could, rather than it just being a, well, what do I do now? So it's the idea of having a placeholder. No one has done that yet, but it isn't to rule out the prospect of that being a possibility. So we as your PLT did approve the bylaws, which were updated. I believe the last time was 2008. So it has been a short little 9 years, and it goes very quickly. And then the decision-making matrix was something that Ashley and I worked on with Spencer and Michaela last year, and apparently it's such a hot document that the other ESA groups are looking at adopting that model. The intent was... Did we charge? The intent was to be more clear about it. So I would just pause for a moment and see, is there an affirmative of accepting those two documents? You can do a thumbs up. Thumbs sideways is I feel uncomfortable. Thumbs down is I could not possibly live with that. So
Do we have to do them individually, or can we do both at the same
Yeah,
time?
we can do both at the same time. So, thumbs up, thumbs sideways is I have a question or maybe a major issue. Thumbs down is I can't live with it and I don't know why anyone would want to live with it. The point of this process is to be able to have a clearer sense for decision making so that perspectives can be shared and heard. So I hear that we're accepted, so that's great to know. We talked about several other things at the PLT meeting this morning. One of the things that we discussed is that with respect to October is the time when the district does a formal count for what they consider the number of students that determines the staffing ratio, the staffing funding. In terms of that account, it looks like our department could lose up to 0.9 FTE. At this stage of things, that's not a finalized thing, but it's just so you know that that's something that your PLT is going to be discussing and coming up with procedures, formal procedures about what to do when we have a lack of FTE available to us based on the student numbers versus a deficit of FTE in relation to the numbers.
Yeah, my one point was similar to building impacts on these types of things. If our FTE goes down, you are all still on a contract, so it wouldn't affect your employment, right? What it does do is we have to look at how do we redistribute or adjust where that FTE would be, what it could come out of.
Does that take into account the 4 new schools that are opening next year?
Schools
Because
it's based off of this year's enrollment.
Schools and numbers are two completely different animals. And again, that's one of the points why
The number went down,
the
and
number
we
went
haven't dealt
down.
with that in a while.
And people who want to support, I am forming what's called a workload committee, people who are interested in looking at that. So for instance, if we've got a zillion buildings, those zillion buildings all get a principal, but there's nothing contractually that requires that there be anybody else assigned to that building. So I'm going to send out an email about interest in workload issues, which is going to have a bearing on bargaining, which is kind of veering into another land. So just have a heads up that your PLT will be looking at that. Another issue that our PLT addressed this morning was the idea of case swapping. There are times when either an individual psychologist may feel that they cannot, in good conscience, take a case. There are times that a principal may say, I don't want you on this case for X number of reasons. There may be times that a regional supervisor or Spencer or somebody, a team lead, may suggest that it may not be appropriate. The team leads are going to be sending out a process that we can follow for a case swapping procedure. So that will be coming out to you. We discussed personnel evaluations. So you should also be getting an email about this. This is November 15th. Every one of you should have had a meeting, an opportunity to meet with your evaluating supervisor, the person that would conduct either your comprehensive evaluation, if you're new to the district, for the first 2 to 3 years, depending on your status, you're required to have a comprehensive evaluation. After the 3rd year, if you've achieved proficiency across the board, you can then go to what's called a focused evaluation. So you should either have a comprehensive or a focused evaluation. That should be done with a supervisor. We are at October 15th, which is the date by which the supervisors are responsible for having conducted those meetings with you. October 15th was the date by which you should have received the materials so that you could formulate the ideas for your evaluation over the year and the goals and kind of the objectives that you want to pursue. It has come to pass that when the administrators of our district had their contract approved, a proportion of them received the benefit that if their number of people that they were supervising exceeded 25, that they could be paid in excess for each additional case that they evaluated. However, that was at a building level, at the district level, so at the supervisors who serve our individual areas, they were not granted that parallel limit with respect to the number of evaluations that are responsible. So there is some nebulousness about who is owning the evaluations this year. So if you did not have a supervisor contact you, please contact your PLT representative.
The PLT representatives will be sending out an email to everyone.
Yeah, we'll be sending an email out.
Yeah.
So please respond, because we should know that as a union person, I would say one thing, and as a person who's wanting to promote what you want to pursue, if anyone were, for instance, wanting to pursue certain things like becoming a career ladder person, you have to have had an evaluation. Their failure to do your evaluation can have a negative impact on you individually. So don't just feel like, I don't need evaluation, cool. It can have a negative effect. And your team has started to take into account, we're going to be backdating to be looking at the FTE distribution process. So again, you will be receiving a communication from your PLT group seeking to know what are the top 3 things that make your schools manageable or unmanageable. What is it that contributes to your sense of, this is a great place, boom, boom, boom. Oh my God, I don't know how I can survive here, boom, boom, boom. Because this kind of data is going to help us with that FTE distribution for the process. Anything that I've missed with respect to our meeting? I can just give roles. I'm serving as the facilitator, which is why I'm chattering so much. We have the note taker, who is Lexi, or Kari is doing it. We've got Nicole serving as timekeeper. We have Teresa taking care of our collecting what we're talking about for the agenda. And we have Stuart, who is keeping our calendar and who will be sending out invitations. Please know you are all welcome at any time to attend the PLT meetings. It's a way to learn about how decisions get made departmentally. Thank you.
So, Sunshine Committee, 1 minute?
1 minute, oh,
And then
wow.
Chandler.
Okay, so first off, I want to dedicate a lot of time to actually Bree. So thank you so much for being a great Sunshine. Thank you for the smooth transition of power, and thank you for being so helpful, so power to make that transition. So the holiday party is going to be after the next department meeting. It's going to be at Elizabeth Burke's place. Is she here?
She is.
Oh, there she is. Yes. So it'll be the same place it was last year after the department meeting, December 13th. Holiday Hearts, Teresa Frazier contacted me, started this thing where she contacted Holiday Hearts about getting people to possibly donate, and she should be hearing back within a week about how big of a family or families we can support. So if you clicked yes on that email, you should be hearing from her pretty soon. Pay your sunshine dues. So if you haven't done that yet, pay those. Respond to Carrie's email about the birthdays. We haven't had
42 people.
So 42 people have told us their birthdays. So if you want to be acknowledged, if you want your birthday,
fun fact will be shared with everyone. So
yeah, those fun facts are very fun.
They are.
Who is surprised that Pei Ling actually went through an interview process?
That was amazing.
I got the job.
I'm not surprised that she would do something like that.
Yeah, and get the job.
Yeah, that was amazing.
If I tell my husband that, he's going to recruit you.
And then also gifts for like special occasions this year. I think we're going to be doing it a little bit differently. We won't have cards going around at staff meetings because we don't have that many department meetings. Instead, the gift givers will be responsible for getting gifts to those people. So Bree and Katie both have respective things coming up.
What?
And then Karen was great, and she actually made sure that we got those gifts, and they're going to be delivered to y'all.
Thank you to Sunshine and the rest of the
We're
department.
doing a surf lesson on their honeymoon.
I'll make sure that it's being recorded.
Yeah, record it.
I'll make sure to upload that to YouTube.
My husband and I are like going into each other. It was great.
Yeah, I'm not an ambi turner. I've tried skateboarding, so surfing's not gonna be great.
The video will be great.
Just a quick thing about roles. So Cece is the treasurer. I know that she's here. Oh, there she is. Hey. So when you pay your dues, pay them to her. She'll take those. And then Tanya was the one who was great and got snacks this morning for everyone. So thank her. And she got a lot of healthy stuff because she's all about being healthy. So that's awesome. Thank you so much for doing that.
And Katie, they will be delivered today. Some nice educational psych toys from her registry that psychs would approve.
And am I forgetting anything?
Well, we decided to do snacks as part of our Sunshine. Instead of birthdays, giving little treats and cards and stuff like that, we thought since we have longer staff meetings and professional development, it would be kind of better to just do snacks for people because it's a long day. So hope everyone's cool with that.
You don't have to remember to bring anything anymore.
Awesome. Oh, and I also wanted to say that I am excited about being the Sunshine Guru. I know that it was like, there was a lot of, and compliment corner. So if you submit compliments and you can get a Starbucks gift card, that's pretty much the straightforward piece of that. And that's everything.
Okay, so quick announcement. Judy, if you could please stand for a moment. So Judy will be Judy will be transitioning roles at the end of the month, and so her buildings will become open, which we wanted to kind of preempt that process as well and go through our typical process of yes. So we're going to go through that typical process as well. So she's going to be the new Southwest Regional Specialist, Program Specialist. And we wanted to note that she'll be there to support a bit of the transition for any of those buildings. And so a little bit of the lead time on this is to help with that transition as well.
The district has to stop taking psychs away from them.
There is an open there's an open position at the moment right now because Gordon is now the interim Southwest supervisor.
Other Gordon.
The other Gordon.
Not our Gordon.
Not our Gordon, the other Gordon.
If I have to say something, I will say I have learned so much from all of you. It's hard to say how much I appreciate the professionalism in this district. I've worked in a lot of districts before, and I've grown so much as a psychologist in Seattle, and I feel like I can step into that role really because of that. I really look forward to supporting the psychs that I'm going to be working with. So I'll see you out there doing the good work.
We want to say thank you to you, Judy. It's a huge loss to our department, but it's a gain kind of tangentially to the side. I think that you're going to be really great in the program specialist role, but we're really going to miss you and all of your contribution. You've been an expert, you've been a career ladder, you've led professional developments, and you've just been, over the years, a resource for us to go to. And you've been holding it down in your buildings and you know, fighting the good fight. So thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have Director Kari Hanson here again to continue the MTSS talk. Yeah. Thank you.
Right? No break for you. All right. Hello, everyone. Good to see you again.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh, Ashley.
I'm sorry, I just bring the suspense. I gotta keep them on their toes.
Yeah, I know.
Did you? I think I disconnected you because I set it on a different presentation mode up here and it went away. Did I?
They can still see you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just can't see them seeing you, but they can still see you.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So, we are going to.
It's still recording.
Can I just quickly say, I'll go over the union stuff later.
Okay.
It hasn't been forgotten.
Well, I mean, they can see the,
You're gonna need me to stay in a general same place, aren't you?
that's okay. I get to play cinematographer.
Okay, great.
This is
All
just
right,
what I do.
So we're just gonna jump into where we left off with MTSS, and a little bit of orientation to that. And what we're gonna end with today is, as you see this information and we dig a little bit deeper into this from the point of view of what MTSS is all about and how it operationally is gonna show in schools over time. This is not something I would expect is going to land and plant and produce fruit immediately, but it's moving through the schools, and schools are at different paces. Okay, so as we go through, my question for you at the end is going to be, what, based on what you're seeing, is, could be, should be the role of the school psychologist? Okay, as you see the different layers here, where do you see yourself fitting? Your expertise, I mean. As far as the time and the shifting of roles, responsibilities, we're not there today, and I'm not here to tell you this is your job. You're the ones who are going to know best when you look at this, where you see your expertise moving this forward for all kids. Okay, so that's going to be our last question of the day. You remember meeting Fernanda. There she is. And you remember that we talked about Fernanda from the point of view of, she's a child who comes in with a unique set of needs. She's a general education student, as all children are. She comes in with a story that includes strengths and needs. MTSS, through leadership structures and other intentional data-driven strategies, finds a way to meet her individual needs through collaboration. That means all kinds of people talking about her when she screens through as, what's going on with her? Prior to experiencing a deficit where scrambling our teachers feel the only thing we can do is get her in front of a sit team. What happens for Fernanda from the moment something is a wonder, okay, to the possibility that she may be put forward for sit? That's the period of time we're talking about within MTSS, preventative in nature. Okay, so then you might remember this definition, which is our current district definition. It may shift a little bit, but the key pieces here have to do with intentional design and redesign of instruction or school experience. One of the things we're working real hard to begin to communicate is design and redesign of services means instructional supports on the academic side and supports and work with the student on the SEL and behavioral side. It's the whole child. In our district, when we see the word instruction, or if we use the word instruction, most folks go to which side of the camp do you think? Academic or SEL? Academic, right. We have to begin to think much broader, and this is a place where your messaging can really help. The other thing that this definition focuses in on is quickly identify and match to the needs. This is the preventative part. So in the school structure, I'll tell you from the general education world that I lived in most of the time, this is where we have to get better. Because we have to have systems in schools where teachers are looking at data or looking at experiences, whether that be everything from attendance rates to disciplinary action to how many minutes a child is out of the classroom because of a disciplinary action or anxiety, which was real big at the school that I worked at. Whatever it is that's having them not in a classroom where they're getting instruction or support, that's data as well. We need to find out what that is quick, bring it around a table where decision making can happen, and get out in front of it. And then all students means all students. Okay, so that's the pieces I like to call out in the definition. In our schools, and I think you may have seen this as a review slide, I think we looked at this before, in our schools where we're seeing the gap begin to close, these are the things that are happening. And there's nothing on this list that doesn't fall within a preventative stance with MTSS. Okay? And the most critical ones from a process standpoint of what you would see a school actionize is going to, well, you can see them, and I'll just ask you, when you look at this list, which of these say it's more than attitude, it has to get to action and operation? Which ones do you see? Call them out to me.
Common assessment.
Common assessments. Not going to happen because we wish it to happen. People have to learn how to do it and do it. What else?
High quality, standard-based certification.
Yes, we heard that for, well, standards came in, what, the early 80s? We've talked this, but putting action to this is a little trickier. And I'll tell you, just from my own view of the last 35 years or so that I've been in this business, I watched standards come on board. I watched us when Gates money came into the district. Was anybody here when transformation dollars came through? When transformation dollars came in, the money came in attached to this. In other words, you demonstrate data-driven, standards-based instructional decision-making, or you don't get the money, right? After the Gates money moved through, we in the general ed world have slipped further and further away from anchoring down what we do to standards, not in all schools, but in several, and looking at data. We do PLCs. I like to say we have a PLC culture, not a data-driven culture. Can you see the difference?
Yeah.
We got teachers meeting all right, but are they looking at data? And if they're not, we're not there anymore. I can tell you they were because I was a teacher at that time. Where you had goal teams in your building. Maybe some of you sat on it. One more thing, we'll just pick one more. What else up here would have to operationalize? It's more than just a mindset.
Process to identify students who need more.
Yes. We used to have the term here that said process to identify students who struggle. We changed it. Why?
Puts the onus on the student, puts the blame sort of on the student rather than the instruction.
Could be. Yes, I would say. What else? What's another reason we changed it from, there we go, from struggle to needs more? I
find the word to be more positive. It's
Yes.
part of that kind
Yes.
of deficit discourse we always use.
Yes, thank you. What else? Those are both good. That's really not the driving reason, but they're both good reasons. But what else? Yes.
I think more implies longer term. So the student might struggle for a shorter term. Maybe they just need a little more time or just that 1 second attention. But needing more might imply you might need a different way to produce.
Sure. Yeah, all of that. I love talking to you all. You are like so smart and strategic. That's so great. But you still didn't get in my head. What else? Way in the back.
The need invokes active engagement.
Uh-huh.
The need struggles like faster.
Okay. Yes. All yes, yes, and yes. Let me ask it this way. When I say to you, if I'm your principal or I'm a principal building you work at, and I say, hey, we got to figure out a plan for students who struggle. Where, maybe not you, but where would teachers go with students who struggle? What kids struggle?
Every kid.
What about kids that are above standard?
They struggle a lot.
Okay. Who do we think of, though, when we say the word struggle? We think of kids who are below standard, who have a learning disability, who are struggling to get to standard. I'm just telling you, that's our mindset out there right now, because we spent so many years focusing on data for kids who were not yet at standard. That's not a bad thing. MTSS, however, and especially in our climate today, where HC students and the wave that is rising right now, for all good reasons, is focusing on what about the students who are at standard, above standard, or well above standard. MTSS systems, including all of you who are watching how schools are operating from a very strategic and data-driven lens, need to be wondering about, are our children who are above standard getting what they need to grow? Not talking about kicking standards out of the park. Any HC student can knock the SBA out, right? That's not what I'm talking about. Schools with high populations of HC or advanced learners must shift their stance to looking at growth. John Hay, Coe, Blaine, Laurelhurst, Wedgwood, West Woodland. Name a few more for me.
Washington,
Washington.
Hamilton,
Jane Addams. Keep going. John Stanford
Ingram.
International, right? Those students, if you look at their data, if you have a chance to get on homeroom and you look at those incoming, let's call it first graders, you're going to see very likely that those incoming first graders are probably 75 to 80% above standard if you look at them already. If we don't shift our thinking within MTSS to what a student needs, and if they need more in order to grow and achieve, we're not going to meet the needs of our advanced learning students. They'll sit and they'll perform, and they'll coast, but they won't grow. That's not acceptable when your population is predominantly affluent, lots of opportunity, and already coming to you above standard. Don't mean to stereotype, but some of our teachers in those schools think they're awesome, and they are. But often they take responsibility for student achievement when students came to them that way in the first place. Make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, so MTSS says all kids well below, below, at, above, and well above. Okay? And that is easy to say, much harder to accomplish. But I'll tell you, for schools who have a predominant population above standard, that is where their focus needs to be. In addition to students who are approaching, they have to shift to their students. They've got to get out of teaching to standard, is my point.
But then we ignore those, just like in those schools, like I'm at Ballard High School, if we do that, we're going to completely neglect all those students who are low income, lack of opportunities.
Why would it be one or the other?
It's just when you're 80% one, it's hard to make sure that you're addressing the needs of everybody. And where's the funding? I mean, it's a great idea.
Yeah, there's no funding.
Okay.
but let me look at it this way. I'll just, again, from my own experience, I taught at a school on top of Queen Anne. I had less than 30% students come to me for reduced lunch. I got $89 a kid. I got maybe $10,000 a year in LAP. That's all I got, nothing else. That did not stop us from the highest growing population in our building being our children below standard. But I'm just telling you, in these schools, teachers will perk up when children are below standard. They will relax when children are at or above. You have had to have seen this, right? Yeah. So I'm not saying shift your focus over here. I'm saying expand your focus like this. Because I've never met a teacher who doesn't go straight to kids who are not at standard. And they've got a whole lot more data that they can look at to show them that. We don't have a lot of data that tells us if an advanced learner is growing. So it's easy to not go looking for it unless it's expected, unless somebody around the MTSS table is asking the question. You can be the folks asking that question. Doesn't mean you will ever likely serve those students unless they're working with an SEL IEP around anxiety. That happens, right? Or other social emotional needs. But you can be asking the question because you see through the lens of data-driven and informed decision-making. Okay? Oh, I just gave you an answer to, forget I said that. You're going to come up with that at the end of what you're rolling. All right, here we go. So here's a way to think of MTSS in Seattle Public Schools. MTSS brings together leadership systems and structures for shared decision-making outside of just the classroom teacher, collaborative practices focusing on data, social emotional learning, ensuring identity safety and a welcoming environment. Those are the two pieces coming out of our SEL and our race and equity groups that say we've got to get here for kids and we've got to get here for kids. That's not going to happen through an academic focus alone. Tiered instruction and support serving the needs of the whole child, data-driven decision-making, action planning, and redesign of the school experience. Often we'll see redesign of instruction. I'm pulling that language because we think we're just redesigning academic lessons. But if we're looking at data or whatever it is we can get our hands on to try to figure out the story about Fernanda or whoever it is, we're really going to redesign their experience in school, bigger than just the academics. Take a look at this list and share with your partner or somebody at your table where it is that you might already be working. I've got you covered, yeah. In one of these places. Talking about maybe outside your typical role. Anything else you're already doing that speaks to one of these? Talk about it at your tables.
Any progress, boss?
Ashley, can I use you as an example from
Feel
some of the
free.
stuff you've done at Washington? a
Feel
little bit?
free. Okay. No, I'm just coloring. I can log in. Do you have your laptop? If you have your laptop, I mean, I have it in the cart. I can log in and you can just. My laptop is currently engaged. Or if your account's not. Can you? Hang on.
The message to ensure the growth so that everyone becomes exactly because then, sometimes we can get referrals from those high achievers, the parents think that how to share achieving the high actually and so
All right, back to me in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0. Thank you. So, at a benefit to our folks who are Skyping in, let me read these bullets to you, and then I would like to hear from you where this work has already begun. For the purposes of this, let's not talk barriers yet, because that would take us until like next week. But let's talk about where it has started in leadership, systems, structures for shared decision making, collaborative practices focusing on data and driven by results, social and emotional learning and ensuring identity, safety, and a welcoming environment, tiered instruction and support serving the needs of the whole child, data-driven decision making, action planning, and redesign of the school experience. Any place up there where you have had the chance to get involved, where you are doing something like this or something within this frame of work? Anybody?
Data-driven decision making?
Yeah, tell me about your experience. How are you?
Well, I think it's like, it's pervasive. It's like, teachers come to consult and that's kind of what we're talking about.
Okay.
Okay, so this is, and then I'll go in and do an observation and then we'll kind of get together and talk about it, come up with an action plan.
Yeah, and you're driving your discussion back into what data are you looking at? If you ever have the opportunity in a group, in a PLC with teachers, at an MTSS table, anytime you have your general education colleagues around you and they're, how do we do it? What do we say? We'll make a generalization. We're good at that. You're going to say, tell me what data are you looking at? Tell me how you're coming to those conclusions. That will begin to help people see that we got to get past what those kids are doing to what we need to be doing as teacher to have an impact on the kids, right? It's shifted into us. Okay, somebody else. What else is up here that you're already maybe doing?
I'm the piggyback, because I think that's the collaborative practices focusing on data. I'm doing a little bit of that. I would love I would love to.
Understand a little more what that could look like?
Well, I'd love to do a lot more, but like you're saying, when you're part of conversations or even, meetings, I think we do have the ability to go beyond just the sort of facile questions, it's like, I like to ask, when's it not happening?
Right, great, yes, and I don't know if you feel this. I've worked with, a dozen school psychologists over the years, maybe in different roles, whether teacher or principal. When you speak to any of this, people believe what you say. They may not act like it. Come to the school. I know. I tell you what, John, Hema could tell you this, but she won't because she's so kind. John Hay could have written the book on how not to treat a school psychologist. It was embarrassing. I mean, it was embarrassing.
Katie's there now.
But they still, I know, it's one of my sad moments, but nevertheless, they do listen. Because you are the only ones in the building who bring an expertise that you have. Nobody has what you have, right? All right, so when you look at this list though, now what I want you to ask each other is, what could it look like, and I'm gonna break you out, I'm gonna jigsaw you a little bit, so hold on. What could it look like in each of these areas for a school psychologist to get involved? Now, I'm not talking about after children are qualified or moving them into qualification. I'm talking about general education students in general. So this table here, you take leadership structures and systems, these first two tables. Folks in the back, raise your hand right, yeah, you guys take collaborative practices focusing on data and driven by results. Who could you get together with? Social and emotional learning, the two tables in the middle, right back there, okay? Tiered instruction and support, serving the needs of the whole child, table in the back. I want you to talk about that one. And then data-driven decision-making, you two up here. All right, talk about it, and then one person from your table is going to just give us, we're going to whip, we're not going to discuss, we'll whip around. I want you to give us one or two ideas of what you envision it could look like in each of these as we move forward. All right, I'm going to give you 1 minute. Go. Ashley, you have a phone? Can you time it for me? Go with 2 minutes.
Okay.
And then tell me when we're at 1:45.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Such a helpful person.
That's the nice thing, if you use me as an example, I don't have to say anything. You get to talk for me.
Hey, I do have a question for you about Washington. I'll be there on Friday. Have they begun asking you or talking with you at all about their L2 kids, Tier 2 kids? Or is the conversation pretty much about the kids in that red zone? Is there any shifting to the ones a little closer to standard, the lower hanging fruit, so to speak?
We are getting there, because we kind of step back to look at the level 1 kids and then the level 2. Interestingly, we have 80.
Okay, good, but we'll take
Yeah.
it. So when you talk with them, this is a message I'm pushing to Susan. Push her into those Tier 2 because those are the kids who will move, are most likely to move in a year from 2 to 3. So, and they go to that, which a lot of schools do, but we want to get them thinking about the quicker, more responsive group that with just maybe 1 or 2 opportunities in Tier 2, they would shift, they would bump.
And that's part of our discussion on Friday, is going to be talking about the list of intervention.
Yes,
I've only provided that to them how many years, and now they.
I think their awareness is shifting because as a district we're finally figuring out this is where we're going.
Yeah.
So now, they're getting kind of, I feel it's like this. They're like, we're getting them into a particular area of focus. Are we good? Okay. Back to me in 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. Okay, you come around. Yes. You should have 1 or 2 ideas that you're going to speak but not explain. We're not going to get into all the explanations today, but you're going to, because with this group, from what I can tell, somebody drops an idea on you, you can go and figure it out, which is, I think, what I love most about you. Here we go. Leadership systems and structures, things you could be doing possibly within your role. Give me one or two.
Help setting up and organizing the MTSS teams from the foundational level, and then education as far as like even what an intervention is for staff.
I'm going to get very excited about this, I can tell. Collaborative practices focusing on data. Next table.
So we talked about having reading specialists to gather the data and having it looked at regularly. And then some schools have data teams that actually look at data more frequently, weekly, monthly, et cetera, that focus on targeted areas like attendance or discipline or grade.
Yeah, consult with them, right? Teach them how to do it. Great. No talking. Social emotional learning in the middle. What do you think? Ideas?
1 minute.
We talked about just making sure that we implement the school-wide stuff. That's the foundation of MTSS. You know, we talked about different acronyms and stuff like that, basic norms. And we talked about having a rotating group where we can keep track of those students who are getting some services or might need services. And we talked about having some kind of venue for kids to have smaller group things. We have advisory in my school, and in my particular school anyway, each little group identifies a leader, and students will be able to help influence who those leaders are, and put some identity safety into some of the leadership among the students in the school.
Great. Thank you. Great. Okay. Tiered instruction and support serving the needs of the whole child, all domains.
We talked about the school psychologists being more involved in the social behavior aspect of tiered instruction. So, like you said before, the educators talk a lot about the academic side of it and seeing that in some ways they have that under control. And then also being people that can either run groups or help identify students that should be in groups together. As teachers come to us and consult with us about kids, we might see similarities between kids that need help.
So this is where I want you to inform me on something. Answer this, tell me this, obviously, this is your world, social, emotional, behavioral, obviously. Is it currently in typical practice anywhere where the school psychologist sees, say, therapy groups of children? You know, like, does that happen out there? It did not happen at my school, not for any reason that we just didn't go there. Is that happening anywhere?
Not necessarily. Typically, that's
okay, cannot understand you that way. I'm not that impressively skilled. But tell me what you know, whether it's here or elsewhere. I want to understand this practice because this is big. Help me understand it. Hema?
So I was able to do that, but because my building funded additional counseling time to my FTE.
Remember that?
So,
Remember that at Co.
Yes.
Right? But see, that's the kind of things that some of our schools won't go, well, here, let's do this. They won't think that way without a suggestion from probably people like me, after talking with people like you, to say, here's some things to think about, right? Anyway, what else? Where else? Tell me about it elsewhere with this particular focus, social emotional, maybe working with small groups, maybe doing some approved therapy types of things. Yes.
In LA, the school psychologist is in charge of doing the social behavior, but it's counseling, so it's an assigned counseling. But in addition, a lot of schools will buy additional time because we do school-wide counseling.
Okay. Buy additional time. Do you have additional time to buy?
No.
I just want one of these days I want you to school me up on this, just so I understand it better, because I want to understand, as schools have the need, what could it look like that doesn't put you outside of a boundary? You know what I'm saying? Because I don't know what your boundaries are, but
some schools, they do buy psych time if the psych is only part-time there. For example, it's 0.6 there. I was 0.6 at Van Nuys, they paid 0.4 for me to be there full-time.
Got it.
In the past. And
for those types of services?
Not necessarily.
For just whatever?
Just whatever is needed.
Okay. Okay. All right, I'll take one more and see. I did it. I totally diverted us, even though I said you're not going to. I did.
It's not atypical, and certainly I would say, as somebody who's worked in another district, it's really
uncommon here because we have a lot of push-in support, particularly at the secondary level. So when there are multiple levy and group health and people, it's something that we could provide, but there are other people in the building who could provide it as well.
Got it.
And there are things that we can provide that no one else can.
We also don't allocate FTE towards that. Like,
Exactly.
no way.
But I intentionally make choices to support my building in alternate ways because there are things I can do
within your
with-
FTE.
Yes.
So it's
that I could not do if I chose to run groups instead.
And that's with you not doing an excessive amount of work outside of school.
That's a different discussion.
But it's deceptive. That's all I'm saying. It's deceptive to say that you do that within your FTE balance.
So let me leave it with this. I think just in this little microcosm of my own research right here, I think where I can see on this is pulling a few folks together who are interested in this topic, who would like to see a platform by which school psychs could operate in this way within appropriate boundaries, not asking more with no pay. I wouldn't ask that of anyone. It's what we do anyway, right? So I would just like to understand this more because this is an area, if you've come to us from another district, you probably go, where is it? It's not here. How do we build it if this is what we say is going to close the gap, right? It's just because unless the idea comes forward and it's moved forward at the central level, it's likely not going to shift. Rhonda, and then we'll wrap up over here.
So some schools have school counselors, some don't.
Correct.
So I think this happens more often in schools that don't have school counselors. But it's my experience that the role of the school counselor is very ill-defined and very widespread.
Yes.
And so while they could be doing some of these services, just really depending on the school, they may or may not be picking that up.
Yes, job description issues with the counselor, that has rolled up as well. And guess who gets to own that now? That's me. That came to me this year. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I will learn it. Okay, yes.
I went to the Wasatch conference and we talked a little about a dual funding model, and I think if we were to move to a dual funding model where school psychologists are funded partially through special ed and partially through general education, we would have more capacity to do things like that, and there are districts that are doing that. I got Edmonds, for example, is dual funding, and they have more capacity.
Is that a new idea? No, it's just we don't do it.
It's important to talk to Edmonds school psych to see realistically how much counseling they're doing versus evals, because I think that there's the paper look, which is that they're 50% counseling, 50% doing evals, and then there's the reality, which is I think it's more like 75% eval. And
I was a psych in Edmonds, and my assignment was I was a school counselor and a school psychologist in the buildings I was at. And yeah, I was in 2 buildings, 2 elementary buildings, but each had 300 kids, so they weren't gigantic buildings. So I led friendship groups, I led divorce groups, I did crisis counseling, I did my special ed evals, and I never felt overwhelmed, ever.
But you're awesome.
I don't think so. I think it was.
You get your reports done 2 weeks before.
I'm going to jump in. We're going to move. This was great. Here's how I'm going to close this out. I just want you to think right now, if an invitation comes out from your leads to weigh in on this topic, we would love you to participate. If this is something that you've either done somewhere before or have a vision for or want to definitely be around the table on as discussions begin, just look for that because I know that this is something we will need to continue to focus on with the people who do it the best. If from a consultation stance only on tier 1, or do we go deeper into a therapeutic stance? And I don't know that, but anyway, we'll keep moving. Tiered instruction and support serving the needs of the whole child. Oh, it's over here.
Yeah. Already did it.
Oh, you did it.
Oh.
You did it? Yeah, we did it. How did I roll? I really got off track. Okay, data-driven decision-making, action planning, and redesign of the school experience. What would you like to see, folks? What would you like to be doing in service to that?
Sure. We talked about when developing interventions, coming up with a goal for that intervention. Make sure maybe that it's a SMART goal, something that you can measure, something that you can check progress on. If it's not working, recognize that it's not working and change the intervention versus thinking that the student is not responding. Using things like rate of improvement to use data to see whether a goal is working or not, because it may look like it's not, maybe not met grade level, but coming from where they were at baseline, it may be momentum.
So this isn't going to shake your world. But you don't have the time to do that, to serve kids within a building. What role can you play in that? Because that goes right after it. But it's not you, or you cannot be the only one in the building who knows how to do that. So what's your job in that? Like if I were you, you would put boundaries around this, but what would you do for your general education people?
I feel like I'm a consultant that kind of leads them through what kind of data we should be looking at.
And I'm talking about formalized training on a particular topic. You see in the building, this is not happening. You talk to your principal and say, this is not happening. It's important for MTSS. I've learned about MTSS. I'd like to suggest I train up your staff on these critical points and how they develop a data piece. That you got to think gen ed now, though, because we're not our teachers are not as skilled in developing an assessment to get to what you want as we might like to think we are. But you can help. So if you can scale it down a little bit for us, and then train them up, because this is critical. This is probably the legs that MTSS stands on right there. Because if there isn't data-driven decision making, it doesn't matter if you're talking about academics or if you're talking about social emotional, nothing's going to change. But here's the other piece that I tell lots of our schools, and I'm beginning to talk to Wyatt about from the data we're getting. I'm pretty confident that over the next year we can get all our schools sitting around a table and looking at data. Great. What is the next barrier going to be? So
what do we do about it?
What do we do with it? It's been 15 years since our district has done instructional-based instruction on differentiation. The last time we did it was when NUA came to town. National Urban Alliance. Anybody remember them? Probably not. Okay? We paid for 5 days of teachers to go to training where they did training based on the text, teaching with the brain in mind. It was one approach. I don't really care what it is. But the point is, teachers have not been trained in differentiated, deeply differentiated instruction, and yet we're saying, look at data. So coming down the road really fast is going to be what's the other opposite, a crevasse, where teachers, well-intended teachers, aren't going to necessarily have a toolkit for instruction that says what you do if a child is well above or well below to bring them to where we want them to be. So that's not necessarily your camp, but helping folks consider data from an authentic lens and look at it and be able to analyze it and interpret it to what it could possibly mean is an important piece.
I think we need to get on the right teams though too, because the MTSS team, when I look at what's involved in that, I think to myself, yeah, I need to be involved in that rather than just going to a sit once a week and taking doodling while they're going through the roll call.
And that's great. That's very honest. Thank you. That is a great segue. That is a great segue. All right, so let's move through the rest of this presentation and now get into what this operationally looks like. So here are the drivers for MTSS. You have a leadership structure of some sort. Looks different at high school than it does in elementary, but every school has to have a leadership team of some sort. That informs what data and assessment are we going to look at in accordance to our CSIP. That's not your job. MTSS team does that. Great if you're here. Awesome. Right? Great if you're in this conversation, but it has to happen. That informs the teamwork and the collaboration that goes on around the tables. Teachers don't, in an MTS system that works well, they just don't pick data that they think is great and feels good. We'd all love to do that. They're going to pick data that drives them toward their CSIP goals. Okay? And if it's not on the CSIP, it should not be a focus for any PLC team, period. So if you know what the school CSIPs are where you work, and you're part of this in a consultation stance, and you're hearing teachers taking data on, I can't think at the moment, I used to have a whole list, but on something that doesn't align with CSIP, you're asking those questions. And then that, under MTSS, leads to that high quality instruction and support stance. So let's dig these out a little bit. Did that. Within each of these, oh gosh. Okay, all right. Okay. So the MTSS leadership, would you remind me, did we do this last time? Mm-hmm. Okay, that's what it looks like. So now, here's my question for you. We know the MTSS leadership team is to be representative, to meet regularly, manage the data flow, and align targets to the CSIP. At your tables, would you please tell me if one of our district pillars, not if, it is, our district pillars for this year, that means our initiatives, are high quality instruction, collaboration and excellence for every kid, MTSS lives there, and race and equity. Would you please tell me within the leadership team structure that we just talked about, where is race and equity in that? How is it protected, attended to? How is cultural competence looked at in this part of the MTSS structure? Talk about it. Race and equity, issues of race and equity. Where do they bubble up in an MTSS team meeting? 1 minute. Okay, if you're sitting around an MTSS team, that's the guidance. High-level leadership skills.
Ooh, hi. Pretty. Right here. I love that. Good. How about you?
Ideas, just jot them down. Someone take them.
I saw your email. I have thoughts.
I love you always.
I do always have thoughts.
I found out about gratitude, and I have so much gratitude that I just can't think. So, but like the needs assessment, thinking about
Yes, and then
our PLC and so now
So it was really cool because then I could share it. Just even that tool was awesome.
Glad. Power up.
databases are not just junk we have a screen. We got internalizing and externalizing.
I don't know what I was viewing. Back to me. 3, 2, 1. To move us along, I've asked a writer at your table to collect ideas on race and equity as we move through this, because we have to find ways and communicate within our core how all of these ideas overlap. Race and equity is probably the conversation we have least, and yet it's one of our #1 highest priorities. So where does it fit with MTSS? All right, we're going to move on. MTSS and enhancement of the SIT process. We talked about this, right? A little bit? Okay. So the way to think of SIT is pictured here within MTSS. This is the collaborative map for MTSS. I get this question a lot, or comment from teachers or principals. They'll say, well, yeah, we're doing MTSS and then we have SIT. No, where we want to move to is SIT is a process of our MTSS collaborative structure, and here's how it works. Let me tell you the story. It begins with all types of data. SIT's way down here, right? We're talking way up here, all types of data. That informs the school's improvement plan. They look at that data and they go, here's what we need to improve, therefore this is where we will write our goals, okay? From there, you have your MTSS leadership and your BLT. The BLT is up there because BLT has the money. If they've got the money, that means they run professional development, decision making. They are the ones who vote on the CSIP. They are the ones who decide to roll forward to the school staff whether you want to add positions, take positions, restructure this, restructure that. That's what BLT does. MTSS leadership needs to be communicating with BLT, period. You cannot run an independent world if they hold the money, okay? From there, and these little lines right here represent a communication pattern. Who talks to who looks at what, right? Now you've got your teacher teams. You've got PLCs, which are data-driven. There's those dark lines again that are supposedly the same color as this, meaning that every single one of these teams, I don't care what you call them, are driven and looking at some sort of data. PLC teacher teams are meeting, maybe even a PBIS team or some other initiative-driven team at a building. Great. Are they looking at data? Great. I have no problem with that. The SIT team, as you know, children can be routed, if you will, or brought into SIT through teachers and through the MTSS leadership team. Ideally, you would see this. But we're not there yet. We are probably not ever, nor legally should we cannot ever get away from somebody saying, I believe this child may have a disability, therefore, right? That comes from, as our guide will tell you, comes from a lot of different places. But what we really want to see is that these teachers are recognizing there's something going on. The MTSS team knows about it. They're watching it. They're helping these teachers figure out what to do. BLT is sending money for intervention, resources, PD, support, whatever it might be. And after a period of time, what do we call that again? I can never remember that period of time before an evaluation rolls. That, come on, there's a name, there's an acronym. Can't remember it. Anyway, you know what it is. In that period of time, we used to shoot for 6 to 8 weeks if we could. Then perhaps MTSS says, you know what, special education teacher who's sitting on my MTSS team, or school psychologist who's sitting on my MTSS team, what do you think? We've tried this and this and this at tier 2 and tier 3. We're not seeing growth. Shall we move this child to a SIT with the possibility of looking at an evaluation? That's how we would like to see it go. So SIT is within MTSS. It does not stand alone as its own thing that you do for a kid because a teacher doesn't know what to do because that kid is not learning the way other kids learn, so what's wrong with them? Right? This system says, what do we need to do different as adults before we look for a determination? Okay? That is the way we think of SIT, and boy, oh boy, folks, can you help us message this? We have 16 schools right now who are receiving intensive supports, trying to get them to move from having 3 all-day sits in a year, where they look at every single kid individually, to an MTSS structure by which they're looking at all kids through a screening mechanism, and they are looking at groups of children throughout the year. All right, another way to think of it, might have your grade level department teams speaking to your MTSS team, informing your SIT team. Would love to get there. Because what that says is, we know that for several weeks we've been trying something intentional before we automatically go to get that kid in special ed.
Kari,
yes, ma'am.
Can you go back a slide?
I can.
I'm trying to wrap my head around how this works.
Okay.
So, could you give an example of a kid? So, it's been identified through the MTSS process, and how working through the PLCs. What does that look like?
Okay. Yes, I will. So let's go with. I'll take a child, you wouldn't know him, but his name was Colin. Colin came into the school, and this was a child who came out of homelessness, right? African-American boy. Came into a first grade classroom way below standard. Did not have the opportunities that most children have. Within that first grade PLC, that homeroom teacher reports, oh my goodness, I've got Colin, here's what I'm seeing. The PLC says, well, here are the standards we are trying to get our first graders to. What is going on with Colin? What might need to happen for Colin? Everybody's talking about it. In the meantime, the principal of that building has said to the PLCs, at every meeting, we want to know what's going on for the kids you have concerns about. We want to know their names. We want some data on them. So a little report is created. Easy tool to make, it's a referral, basically, that says, Colin, our PLC has identified Colin and 8 others, or 10 others, or 12 others in first grade who are this far below standard. We need resources and support. That information goes here. The MTSS team, who has been talking to BLT, says, we've got money for that. Let's work out this resource for this child. At high school, gonna look very different, but try to track with me on the principles, okay? Principles, P-L-E-S, principles. MTSS team now has Colin on their radar. You might be at that table and you may not speak it, but you're going, I'm gonna be watching Colin. There's some things here, some trauma, some behaviors, at least 8 to 12 months below standard, or however you look at it. I'm gonna be watching him. So every time we meet, an MTSS team is gonna meet maybe every 2 weeks at the start of the year. This PLC, now that this has been identified to this team, that this child is of concern, we are taking data on that child every 2 weeks. Why? Because they're getting some sort of extra support. We don't offer extra support unless we know it's working, like I heard over here. If I'm applying this intervention, how do I know if it's working? They collect that data, and every week or two, the representative person is checking in with 1st grade, 2, 3, and 4, 5, or 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade to find out how those children are doing. Now, time goes by. We're into, I don't know, depending on the intensity of the behaviors or the low growth or whatever might be going on, now we're having a conversation and we're looking now at 4 weeks. And we're not seeing anything move, change, and actually has gotten worse. We've got some other concerns. Now there's a conversation that says, I think we need to call a sit. And the team says, yeah, I think we do. And now that child rolls forward very quickly to sit. How many of you have watched your sit schedules? 2 things. You've watched your sit schedules be so backlogged that Colin could get on sit, but we're not going to see him probably for 6 weeks. Right? Yeah. How many of you had teachers rolling kids to sit in June for the September meetings? They hadn't even gotten tier 1 yet. Tier 2. They went straight to sit because we believe, we're just absolutely sure that child's got to have a disability. If it doesn't show up now, it's certainly going to show up in the fall. After summer goes by and they've had no support, right?
The summer slide.
Okay, so does that help? That would be the operational structure by which it would work. Within these black lines here, you've got a mechanism, a form, a document, and this group is expected to report to this group every time if these kids are in tier 2.
Are those PLCs like teacher data groups then?
It's elementary
our
level.
Our definition of PLCs is like we might be talking about intervention, we might be talking about our psych PLCs are very different. So you're talking about maybe grade level teachers.
Correct. These are, think of these as data teams. In fact, we're thinking of changing the word, but I'm not allowed to do it yet.
Would that in high school be department?
Yes, it could be, but we see other things. At high school, we see PBIS teams who are specifically monitoring attendance and discipline.
Yes.
I don't care what they are. If this is a high school setting, you've still got teachers looking at data who are reporting to somebody. But at high school, they're probably not reporting to one team. There's probably a layer here which reports to admin. Bottom line is, folks, teachers have got to be looking at data. I don't care if there's one teacher in 8th grade who they're the only math teacher. Someone has to be asking within the team, what data are you looking at, Mr. Cosgrove? How often are you monitoring that child that you have concerns about? And tell me about your practice. So even one teacher, because there aren't any more than one, are still rolling data. When they meet in a PLC, they're probably meeting with the whole math department, but that doesn't stop you from looking at data, because the danger is, if I'm not looking at student data, I spend that PLC time talking about my own practice and your practice, but that does not move me into student learning. That keeps me circling student learning while I'm talking about my practice. 2 very different things. Okay, questions, and we're out of time.
One of the things I'm wondering about with this whole MTSS piece now becoming, prevalent in the schools and being, school counselors are being sent to training. I mean, I found myself confused about the SIT team for the first time in 13 years because it's like they're almost describing it as an evaluation team now. Like, oh yeah, this is where we make decisions about whether to evaluate for a 504. And I'm like, whoa, what happened? Did I miss the pre-referral discussion?
Does this make sense then, that this is where the pre-referral
Yes, it makes total sense. But I'm just saying, now that they're talking MTSS, at one of my schools, it's like they're describing the SIT team in a way that unfamiliar to me.
And it is for a lot of our schools, because this used to be here,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm just saying, you figure this out. We're not here yet. A lot of our schools have shifted to this, and a lot of our schools have not. But this is where the importance of messaging slowly, over time, as you're ready. What did you just call it? The pre-referral period? But there's another acronym for it. I can't think of it. It's the, I don't know, I'll ask Dr. Wood when we're done. I'll give him enough cues that he'll be able to translate for me what in the world I'm talking about. But anyways, yeah, that is what we're talking about. That's what takes place. Yes?
I would suggest, at least for our purposes, that we should characterize it as that leadership team replacing SIT. I think that would help our world understand that, and that SIT team is really an MVP.
Yeah, that's what our procedural guide references it as. I think that's a good goal to get to. I think if we did that now, we'd have a big gap
I don't
between
think that's consistent.
what schools are ready for and what they could be able to do.
I don't think all SIT teams are MPTs.
Okay.
Yeah. She's just saying. Actually, we are running out of time. Yeah, we have. I know we have more questions, but we'll continue this discussion, this conversation throughout the year.
Yeah, that's great. Invite me back.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kari.
Thank you guys. I'm gonna let these for now.
We have until 1 o'clock lunchtime, and we'll come back here at 1.